The silence in the park was deafening as wealthy executives ignored the frantically signing boy. Only a small girl in tattered clothes understood his desperate warning about the papers they were about to sign. But no one imagined what would come next. Where are you watching this emotional story from? Drop your location in the comments and hit that like button for more heartwarming tales like this one. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Central Park as Robert Hartwell arranged the contracts on the elegant outdoor table. At 58, the real estate mogul had built an empire that dominated the Manhattan skyline. But today's deal would be his crowning achievement. Executives in tailored suits mingled around champagne-laden trays, their laughter punctuating the spring air. Standing silently at the edge of the gathering was 12-year-old Mason Hartwell, Robert's only son. Born deaf, Mason had learned to navigate his father's world through observation. His fingers nervously fidgeted with the buttons on his Brooks Brothers blazer as he watched the proceedings with growing alarm. Something about the contracts wasn't right. He had seen the original documents in his father's study last night, and these were different. Mason's hands began to move frantically, trying to catch his father's attention, but Robert had positioned Mason behind the gathering, out of sight of the business partners. "Stay there and behave," he had instructed earlier through a hastily typed note. "This is grown-up business." From beneath a nearby oak tree, a small figure watched the scene unfold. Lily Carter, 10 years old with tangled blonde hair and clothes that hadn't been washed in weeks, had been living in a makeshift shelter of cardboard and tarp, not far from this wealthy gathering. 6 months ago, she had been a normal fourth grader before her mother's illness and their eviction. Now the park was her home and invisibility her protection, but Lily wasn't like other homeless children. Before her world collapsed, she had befriended a deaf girl in her class and learned American Sign Language with remarkable speed. Her teachers had called her gifted. Now, as she watched the desperate boy in expensive clothes signing frantically, she understood what no one else did. "The signatures are on false documents," he was signing over and over. "There's a second set. They're being tricked." As Robert raised his glass and prepared to toast the imminent signing, Mason's desperation peaked. Tears formed in his eyes as he signed more urgently, invisible to the adults who controlled his world. Lily hesitated only a moment. Stepping from the shadows, her dirty sneakers silent on the manicured grass, she approached the gathering. A security guard turned toward her, frowning, but before he could intercept, she positioned herself directly across from Mason and raised her small hands. "I understand you," she signed. "Tell me more." Mason's eyes widened in disbelief. In his father's world, few bothered to learn his language. He signed rapidly, explaining what he had discovered. The security guard reached for Lily's shoulder. "Hey kid, you can't be here. This is a private event." That's when Lily did something she hadn't done in weeks. She spoke aloud. Her voice, clear and surprisingly confident, cut through the champagne-infused chatter. "The contracts are fake," she announced. "This boy is trying to tell you there's been a switch." Robert Hartwell froze, his champagne glass halfway to his lips, as all eyes turned to the disheveled girl and his silent son. In that moment, as confusion rippled through the gathered executives, the carefully orchestrated world Robert had built began to crumble. Behind him, his partner Marcus Whitfield quietly slipped a folder into his briefcase, his face hardening as he caught Mason's knowing stare. "What nonsense is this?" Robert Hartwell's voice cut through the sudden silence, his face flushing with embarrassment as he glared at Lily. The assembled executives shifted uncomfortably, their expressions caught between confusion and suspicion. Mason took 3 quick steps forward, his hands flying in desperate explanation, but his father turned away. "I apologize for the interruption," Robert said smoothly to his guests. "Security, please remove this child." The guard's hand closed around Lily's thin arm, but she stood her ground, her eyes locked with Mason's. "Your son is trying to save your company," she said, her voice wavering but determined. "The contracts are different from the ones you approved. I can tell you what he's saying." Marcus Whitfield stepped forward, his silver hair gleaming in the afternoon light. At 65, he'd been Robert's mentor and business partner for 20 years. "Robert, perhaps we should postpone the signing until we clear up this misunderstanding." His smile didn't reach his eyes as he glanced at Mason, who was frantically shaking his head. Something in his son's desperation finally penetrated Robert's embarrassment. In 15 board meetings over the past month, he'd seen Mason only at dinners, when the boy sat silently beside his private tutor. When was the last time he'd really looked at his son? "Wait," Robert said, raising a hand to the security guard. He turned to Mason. "What is it you're trying to say?" Mason's hands remained still, his eyes filling with frustrated tears. For years his father had promised to learn sign language, but never made the time. The irony crushed him, the one moment his father actually wanted to understand him, and it was too late. Lily gently pulled free from the guard's loosened grip and approached Mason. "I can interpret," she offered, her voice stronger now. "I learned ASL at school." Robert hesitated, then nodded curtly. Mason's hands began to move, and Lily translated. "He says he saw the original contracts in your study last night. These are different. The percentage splits are changed, and there's a clause about automatic transfer of controlling shares if certain benchmarks aren't met." She paused as Mason continued signing. "He says, Mr. Whitfield visited late last night after you went to sleep and switched the documents." The gathering erupted in murmurs. Marcus laughed, but the sound was brittle. "This is absurd. Are we really going to take the word of a homeless child and a boy who—" He caught himself, but the damage was done. "A boy who what, Marcus?" Robert asked quietly, a dangerous edge to his voice. "A boy who can't speak? Is that what you were going to say about my son?" For the first time, Robert really looked at Mason. His intelligent eyes, his trembling hands, the desperation and determination in his face. All those years of pushing his son aside, arranging for tutors and caretakers instead of being a father. All because after his wife died giving birth to Mason, he couldn't bear the reminder of his loss, or the challenge of raising a child who experienced the world differently than he did. "Check the documents," Lily interpreted as Mason signed rapidly. "The originals are hidden in the 3rd volume of the financial history books in his office." Robert hesitated only a moment before turning to his assistant. "James, call the office. Have them check my bookshelf and fax over anything they find." "Ndum." As the assistant hurried away, Marcus's composed facade began to crack. "This is preposterous. I won't stand here and be accused by a child." "Then perhaps you should sit down," Robert suggested coldly, gesturing to a chair. "Because nobody's signing anything until we verify these claims." From her position beside Mason, Lily suddenly swayed, her face paling. It had been nearly 2 days since her last proper meal. Mason reached out instinctively, catching her arm to steady her. "When did you last eat?" he signed, forgetting momentarily that she was the only one who understood. Lily tried to smile. "It doesn't matter," she signed back. But it mattered to Mason. For the first time in his life, someone had truly seen him, had given him a voice when he needed it most. He turned to his father and signed slowly, deliberately, hoping the meaning would somehow cross the chasm between them. Robert watched his son's hands move, feeling the weight of his failure as a father. Then, surprising everyone, he knelt beside the small, brave girl who had done what he never could. Listened to his son. "Thank you," he said softly. "Whatever happens next, thank you for hearing him." The next 24 hours transformed 3 lives forever. While Robert's legal team confirmed the contract substitution and security escorted a protesting Marcus Whitfield from the premises, Mason refused to leave Lily's side. He'd watched in horror as she nearly collapsed from hunger, her small body finally surrendering to weeks of deprivation. His father, for once responsive to his son's silent pleas, had immediately called his private physician. Now, as morning light filtered through the penthouse windows, Mason sat in an armchair beside the guest room bed where Lily slept. Dr. Bennett had treated her for malnutrition and dehydration, recommending gradual refeeding and complete rest. Mason had stayed vigilant through the night, watching her chest rise and fall, afraid she might disappear if he looked away. "You should get some sleep too," Robert said from the doorway, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. He held 2 mugs of hot chocolate, offering one awkwardly to his son. Mason accepted the mug, but made no move to leave. His father sighed and sat in the adjacent chair. For several minutes they sipped in silence, the gulf between them seeming both vast and, for the first time, potentially bridgeable. "I called social services," Robert finally said, watching his son's face carefully. "They're sending someone this afternoon." Mason set down his mug, his hands flying in protest. Robert raised a hand helplessly. "I don't understand what you're saying." Frustration flashed across Mason's face. He pulled out his phone and typed rapidly, showing the screen to his father. "Don't send her away. She has nowhere to go." Robert ran a hand through his silver hair. "Mason, we can't just keep a homeless child. There are laws, procedures." Mason typed again. "She saved your company. She was the only one who listened to me." The accusation in those words hit Robert like a physical blow. For 12 years, he'd provided his son with every material advantage while withholding the one thing Mason truly needed: connection. He'd told himself it was because of his busy schedule, because sign language was difficult, because specialized schools and tutors could do a better job than he could. But the truth was simpler and more damning. After losing his wife, he couldn't bear another emotional attachment. "I've made an appointment," Robert said abruptly, "with an ASL instructor. For me, starting tomorrow." Mason's eyes widened in surprise. "It's long overdue," Robert admitted. "As for Lily..." He glanced at the sleeping child, her face peaceful perhaps for the first time in months. "I've been making some calls. Her mother died of cancer 6 months ago. Medical bills took everything they had. There was no other family. She's been living in the park since her mother's landlord evicted them." Mason's face darkened with anger as his fingers typed, "So the system failed her." "Yes," Robert acknowledged, "just like I failed you." Before Mason could respond, Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked disoriented for a moment, taking in the luxurious surroundings, before her gaze settled on Mason. A small smile lifted the corners of her mouth. "You're still here," she signed. "I'm not going anywhere," Mason signed back. Robert watched this silent exchange, feeling both excluded and moved. He cleared his throat. "Good morning, Lily. How are you feeling?" She turned to him, suddenly shy. "Better, thank you." Her voice was barely audible. "You don't have to speak if you don't want to," Robert said. "Mason can show you how to use the text-to-speech app on his tablet." Lily nodded gratefully, then signed something to Mason. He smiled and typed on his phone, showing his father. "She asked if she's in trouble for interrupting your meeting." Robert laughed softly. "Quite the opposite. You saved me from making a catastrophic mistake. Marcus Whitfield has been my partner for decades. I trusted him completely." His expression sobered. "Sometimes we don't really see the people closest to us." The irony of his words wasn't lost on any of them. As sunlight streamed through the windows of the penthouse, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air between father and son, Robert Hartwell made a silent promise to truly see his son, starting today. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. James, Robert's assistant, entered with a tablet in hand. "Mr. Hartwell, social services is on the line. They want to discuss arrangements for the girl." Mason's face fell as he reached for Lily's hand. Robert stood, straightening his shoulders. "Tell them that won't be necessary just yet. I'm pursuing other options." He looked at the two children, one born to privilege but emotionally neglected, one who had lost everything but maintained her compassion. Very specific options. "Temporary guardianship is the best we can do right now, Mr. Hartwell," Attorney Samantha Reeves explained 3 days later as they sat in her downtown office. Given your resources and Lily's situation, the judge was sympathetic, but adoption is a lengthy process. Robert nodded, signing the documents with an unfamiliar sense of purpose. Beside him, Mason and Lily sat close together, their hands moving in animated conversation. In just 3 days, they had developed a friendship that transcended their vastly different circumstances, communicating in a language Robert was only beginning to understand. His first ASL lesson had been humbling. The instructor, Ms. Chen, had been frank. "Learning at your age will be challenging, Mr. Hartwell. Most parents start when their deaf children are infants." The implied criticism had stung, but Robert accepted it as deserved. Now he practiced fingerspelling whenever possible, determined to bridge the gap one letter at a time. "What happens next?" Robert asked, returning the signed papers to Samantha. "Lily will stay with you while we investigate her background more thoroughly. There will be home visits, interviews. If no relatives come forward and you still wish to pursue adoption, we'll proceed." Her eyes softened as she glanced at the children. "It's remarkable what you're doing." Robert shook his head. "What's remarkable is what she did. The company I spent 30 years building would have been stolen from under my nose without her intervention." He lowered his voice. "Have they found Marcus yet?" "No," Samantha replied, "but the FBI has frozen his accounts. It's only a matter of time." As they left the attorney's office, Robert's phone buzzed with a message from James. Educational consultant arrived at Penthouse for 2 p.m. appointment. Robert had spent the past days researching schools that could accommodate both Mason and Lily. His son's expensive private tutors had provided excellent academic instruction but limited social development, and Lily, despite months of homelessness, displayed remarkable intelligence. They deserved an environment where both could thrive. Back at the Penthouse, Dr. Eleanor Winters waited in the living room, a portfolio of educational options spread before her. In her 50s, with steel-grey hair and kind eyes, she had 30 years of experience in education for deaf and hearing children. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, rising to shake his hand, "and this must be Mason and Lily." She surprised them all by signing fluently to both children, who brightened immediately. For the next hour, they discussed possibilities. Dr. Winters observed Mason and Lily's interaction closely before making her recommendation. "The River Valley Academy has a unique approach," she explained. "It's not strictly a school for the deaf, but a bilingual environment where both ASL and spoken English are used throughout the curriculum. Hearing students learn sign language, deaf students have interpreters and technical support. The focus is on communication across differences." Robert frowned. "It's in Connecticut. That's quite a commute." Dr. Winters smiled diplomatically. "Actually, it's a boarding school. Students return home on weekends." "Boarding school?" Robert's frown deepened. "I've only just started to—" He stopped himself, watching Mason and Lily's excited signing as they looked at photos of the campus. "What do you two think?" he asked. Mason typed on his tablet. "It looks amazing, Dad. Kids like me and kids like Lily together." Lily nodded enthusiastically, then signed something that Mason translated. "She says she's never been to a real school before, just public school." The innocent distinction made Robert wince. He'd spent years insulating Mason from the world, believing he was providing the best education money could buy, while actually isolating him further. And here was Lily, who had experienced the worst of what life could offer, still eager to learn and connect. "I would need to see the campus first," Robert said carefully. "And they would need to pass a rigorous security check." After the incident with Marcus, he was taking no chances with his son's safety, or with Lily's. "Of course," Dr. Winters agreed. "But there's something else you should consider." She leaned forward earnestly. "Your son has extraordinary potential, Mr. Hartwell. His spatial reasoning and pattern recognition scores are off the charts, and based on how quickly Lily acquired sign language, I suspect she has similar gifts. Together, in the right environment." She didn't need to finish. Robert had built his empire by recognizing potential where others saw only risk. For the first time since Mason's birth, he allowed himself to feel something long suppressed: hope. Not for business success or material gain, but for his son's happiness. For a future where Mason wasn't defined by what he couldn't do, but by what he uniquely could. "We'll visit next week," Robert decided, watching as Mason showed Lily how to sign boarding school properly. Their hands moved in perfect synchrony, already developing their own language of friendship and trust. That night, as Robert practiced fingerspelling in his study, James interrupted with an urgent call. The FBI had tracked Marcus to Buenos Aires, but lost him again. More disturbing was what they'd found on his computer: detailed information about Mason's daily routine, his tutors, his medical appointments. "He was planning something, sir," James reported gravely. "Something involving your son." The Connecticut countryside blurred past as Robert's chauffeur-driven Bentley approached River Valley Academy. In the back seat, Mason and Lily pressed against opposite windows, signing excitedly about the glimpses of campus coming into view. Between them sat Agent Danielle Cooper, the FBI protection specialist who hadn't left their side in the week since the disturbing discovery about Marcus's intentions. "Remember," Agent Cooper said, "this is just a preliminary visit. Security assessments take time." Robert nodded tensely. The revelation that Marcus had been investigating Mason had transformed his concern into obsession. He'd increased security at the penthouse, restricted all visitor access, and nearly cancelled this campus visit until Agent Cooper convinced him that controlled exposure was better than complete isolation. "We still don't understand his motive," Robert said quietly. "Why target Mason?" Cooper's expression remained neutral. "Financial crimes often escalate to personal vendettas, Mr. Hartwell. Your son exposed him. In Whitfield's mind, that may be unforgivable." As the car pulled through the academy gates, Robert studied the perimeter fencing, noting security cameras and guard stations with professional assessment. If his son and Lily were to attend this school, it would need to be impenetrable. Headmistress Janet Farrow waited on the steps of the main building, a restored 19th-century mansion set among maple trees just beginning to show autumn colors. In her early 60s, with a posture that suggested a background in dance or athletics, she greeted them first in spoken English, then in fluid ASL. "Welcome to River Valley," she signed to Mason and Lily. "We're delighted you're considering joining our community." The campus tour revealed an educational environment unlike anything Robert had imagined. In classrooms, hearing and deaf students worked side by side, with teachers who moved seamlessly between spoken word and sign. Technology was integrated everywhere: interactive screens, speech-to-text displays, vibration-based musical instruments. Most striking was the ease of communication between all students, regardless of hearing ability. "Every hearing student learns ASL from day one," Headmistress Farrow explained. "And every deaf student has access to whatever communication tools work best for them. We don't believe in forcing choices. We believe in multiplying options." Mason couldn't contain his excitement, signing rapidly to Lily as they observed a science class where students were building bridge models. Unlike his isolated tutorials at home, here learning was collaborative and dynamic. "This is the dining hall," Headmistress Farrow continued, leading them into a sunlit space with round tables. "We arrange seating to ensure mixed groups of hearing and deaf students, encouraging continuous language exchange." Lily tugged at Mason's sleeve, pointing to a wall covered with photographs. They approached to find images of alumni with their accomplishments listed below. Architects, scientists, artists, entrepreneurs. What struck Robert was that the photos didn't indicate which graduates had been deaf and which hearing. Their achievements spoke for themselves. "And now," said Headmistress Farrow, "perhaps Mason and Lily would like to visit potential dormitories while we discuss administrative matters, Mr. Hartwell." Agent Cooper tensed, but Robert surprised her by nodding. "Go ahead," he told the children, trusting them to the student guides who had appeared. It was the first time since the contract incident that he'd allowed Mason out of his sight. A small step, but significant. In the headmistress's office, Robert was direct. "I need to know about your security protocols. My son may be targeted by a dangerous individual." Janet Farrow's expression remained composed. "Mr. Hartwell, nearly 20% of our students come from high-profile families, diplomats, celebrities, business leaders. Some have active security concerns. Our campus has state-of-the-art systems and trained personnel, and we can accommodate private security details when necessary." Robert nodded, marginally reassured. "And academically?" Mason's previous education was unconventional. "Our assessment shows he's academically advanced but socially underdeveloped," she replied candidly. "Not unusual for children educated in isolation. As for Lily, despite gaps in formal education, her aptitude scores are extraordinary." "Could they room together?" Robert asked. "They've become dependent on each other." Headmistress Farrow smiled kindly. "We don't offer mixed-gender dormitory arrangements, Mr. Hartwell. But they could be in adjacent buildings. The separation would be good for them, forming new relationships while maintaining their special friendship." When Mason and Lily returned, their faces flushed with excitement, Robert knew his decision was already made. For 12 years, he'd kept Mason in a protective bubble, believing isolation meant safety. But watching his son sign animatedly about the campus, Robert recognized the profound harm his well-intentioned choices had caused. "We need to talk about starting dates," he said, surprising everyone, "and additional security arrangements." As they prepared to leave, Lily lingered by the alumni wall, studying one photograph intently. Robert approached, following her gaze to an image of a young woman with familiar features. "That's Elizabeth Carter," Headmistress Farrow explained, joining them. "Class of 1988, brilliant mathematician who went on to work at NASA." Robert felt Lily stiffen beside him. Mason had approached too, his expression questioning as Lily's hands formed trembling signs. "That's my mother," Lily signed, her eyes never leaving the photograph. "That's my mom." The revelation that Lily's mother had been an alumna of River Valley Academy opened doors that had seemed permanently closed. Elizabeth Carter's academic records confirmed what Lily had signed in disbelief. Her mother had been a scholarship student with extraordinary mathematical ability. After graduation, she'd worked for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, contributing to Mars rover navigation systems before a devastating cancer diagnosis had derailed her promising career. "She never told me," Lily signed repeatedly in the days following their campus visit, her expression caught between pride and grief. "She never said she was smart." Robert, watching his son comfort Lily, recognized the profound bond forming between these two children whom circumstance had brought together. Mason, who had lived with every material advantage but emotional neglect, and Lily, who had known deep love but devastating loss and poverty. They were healing each other in ways no adult intervention could achieve. 3 weeks after their campus visit, Robert sat in his home office reviewing security upgrades to River Valley Academy that would make Fort Knox seem vulnerable by comparison. His company would absorb the costs in exchange for naming rights to a new science building. It wasn't charity. It was investment in his son's future and in Lily's. A knock at the door interrupted his concentration. James entered, his normally composed face etched with concern. "Sir, there's been a development with the Whitfield situation." Robert set down his pen. "They've found him." "No, but they've uncovered something disturbing." James hesitated. "The FBI has been analyzing Whitfield's financial records. They found regular payments to a woman named Victoria Hartwell." The name hit Robert like a physical blow. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Victoria died giving birth to Mason." "I know, sir." James's voice was gentle. "But these payments began 12 years ago, right after Mason was born, and continued until 3 months ago." Robert's mind reeled as implications cascaded through his consciousness. "Are they suggesting—" "They don't know what to suggest," James admitted. "Agent Cooper is downstairs. She has more information." The next hour passed in a blur as Agent Cooper presented evidence that shattered Robert's understanding of his own life. Bank transfers, property records, flight manifests, all pointing to the impossible conclusion that Victoria Hartwell hadn't died 12 years ago, that Marcus Whitfield had been sending her money for over a decade, that Robert's trusted partner and his supposedly deceased wife had orchestrated an elaborate deception. "But why?" Robert demanded, his voice hoarse. "Why fake her death? Why take a mother from her child?" Agent Cooper's expression was compassionate, but firm. "We believe it was financial, Mr. Hartwell. Your marriage contract included a significant trust that would transfer to Victoria upon Mason's birth. By faking her death and having the trust transfer to Mason with you as trustee, Whitfield could access it," Robert finished numbly. As Mason's godfather and Robert's most trusted advisor, Marcus had helped establish the complex trust structures that now protected Mason's inheritance and apparently provided a mechanism for systematic theft. "We need to speak with Mason," Agent Cooper said gently. "He may have information he doesn't realize is important." "He was an infant when she supposedly died," Robert protested. "What could he possibly know?" "Children who are deaf often develop heightened observational skills," she explained, "and Mason has clearly demonstrated an ability to notice things others miss." Robert thought of the contract switch, how Mason alone had spotted the substitution that would have cost them everything. "I'll get him," he agreed reluctantly. Mason and Lily were in the penthouse's newly established communication room, practicing ASL with Ms. Chen. The walls were covered with sign language posters, and interactive screens displayed ASL tutorials. Robert had converted his rarely used meditation space into this learning environment, where he now spent hours each evening struggling through basic signs while Mason patiently corrected his form. "Mason," Robert signed carefully, one of the few complete sentences he could manage without fingerspelling. "Can you come with me? Important." Mason followed his father, with Lily instinctively coming along. Robert didn't object. The children had become inseparable, their trauma-born bond strengthening daily. In the office, Agent Cooper greeted Mason with competent signs, establishing immediate rapport. "Mason," she signed clearly, "I need to ask about something from when you were very young. Do you remember anything about your mother?" Mason's hands stilled, his expression confused. He'd been told his entire life that his mother had died bringing him into the world, that her loss was the price of his existence. It was a burden no child should bear, but one Robert had unintentionally placed on his son's shoulders through years of emotional distance. Slowly, Mason raised his hands and signed something that Agent Cooper translated for Robert. "I don't remember her, but sometimes I dream about a woman who smells like lemons who watches me sleep." Robert felt the blood drain from his face. Victoria's signature scent had been lemon verbena. He had never shared that detail with Mason. "When did you have these dreams?" Agent Cooper signed. Mason's response came hesitantly. "When I was little, maybe 5 or 6. The dreams stopped after Uncle Marcus said they weren't real." Uncle Marcus, the man who had been secretly funneling money to Victoria for 12 years, the man who had been studying Mason's routines and medical records, the man who had tried to steal Robert's company and who had disappeared when his schemes began to unravel. "Mason," Robert signed slowly, each movement deliberate despite his limited vocabulary. "Your mother might be alive." The boy's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in confusion. His hands flew in rapid signs that Robert couldn't follow, but Lily could. She translated aloud for Robert and Agent Cooper. "He's asking if that means you've been lying to him all these years." The accusation struck Robert with devastating force. "No," he signed emphatically. "I thought she died. I believed it." He switched to fingerspelling to express the complexity beyond his limited sign vocabulary. "I'm ISSEDHEREVERYDAY. Mason studied his father's face, searching for truth in the features that mirrored his own. Then he signed a single question that needed no translation. "Where is she now?" The search for Victoria Hartwell consumed the next month, delaying Mason and Lily's enrollment at River Valley Academy until the spring semester. FBI investigations revealed a complex trail leading through Switzerland, Singapore, and finally to a remote coastal property in New Zealand, registered to a shell company connected to Marcus Whitfield. Satellite imagery showed a luxury compound with extensive security features, including a private dock with a speedboat perpetually moored alongside. Local authorities confirmed a woman matching Victoria's description lived there, though under the name Vivian Whitney. She rarely left the property and received few visitors, except for Marcus Whitfield, who had been photographed arriving by private helicopter on multiple occasions over the years. "We don't yet understand the nature of their relationship," Agent Cooper explained during one of her now regular briefings in Robert's office. "Coercion? Collaboration? Stockholm Syndrome? Without speaking to Victoria directly, we can only speculate." Robert barely heard her. On his desk sat photographs of the woman he had mourned for 12 years, taken from long-range surveillance cameras. Older, yes, her chestnut hair now streaked with silver, but unmistakably Victoria. His Victoria, who he'd believed died in childbirth, whose death had left him so devastated he could barely look at their son without drowning in grief. "What do we tell Mason?" Robert asked, his voice hollow. For weeks, he had maintained the fragile explanation that they were looking for information about his mother, without confirming the full truth, that she might have willingly abandoned her infant son for money. "I think it's time for full disclosure," Agent Cooper advised. "He deserves to know everything we know, especially given recent developments." The recent developments were the anonymous gifts that had begun arriving for Mason 2 weeks earlier. First, a hand-carved wooden box containing childhood photographs Mason had never seen, himself as an infant, sleeping in a hospital bassinet. Then a music box that played Beethoven's Für Elise through vibration patterns a deaf person could feel. Yesterday, a model of the solar system with peculiar markings on the planet Mars, precisely where Elizabeth Carter had focused her work at NASA. "The gifts aren't from Marcus," Agent Cooper continued. "They're from Victoria. She's reaching out to Mason, establishing connection before making direct contact. Or she's manipulating him," Robert countered bitterly, "setting up some new deception." Agent Cooper's expression softened. "Mr. Hartwell, I understand your anger, but whatever Victoria's role in this fraud, she's Mason's mother. That relationship deserves careful consideration." That evening, Robert faced the most difficult conversation of his life, in the communication room with Ms. Chen present as an interpreter to ensure nothing was lost in Robert's still-developing signing. He told Mason everything about the payments, the New Zealand property, the mounting evidence that his mother had participated in an elaborate fraud. Mason sat completely still, his normally expressive face a mask of confusion. Beside him, Lily maintained physical contact, her small hand on his arm offering silent support. When Robert finished, the room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. Finally, Mason's hands moved in a question. "Did she ever try to contact me before now?" Ms. Chen interpreted, and Robert shook his head. "Not that we've found evidence of. The first contact appears to be these recent gifts." Mason absorbed this, then signed again. "Does she know sign language?" The question caught Robert off guard. In 12 years of grieving Victoria, he had never considered whether she would have learned to communicate with their deaf son. The uncomfortable answer was that he didn't know, and had never thought to ask. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we can find out." Mason nodded slowly, then signed something lengthy that Ms. Chen translated. "I want to meet her. Not because I forgive her, but because I need to understand. Dad, I've spent my whole life thinking I caused her death. Now I find out she chose to leave me. I need to know why." Robert felt his chest constrict. For years he had inadvertently allowed Mason to believe he was responsible for his mother's death. It was a burden no child should carry, and one Robert had been too lost in his own grief to recognize. "We'll arrange it," Robert promised, "but safely on our terms." That night, Robert couldn't sleep. He paced his penthouse, eventually finding himself outside the door to the guest room where Lily now permanently resided. A soft light glowed beneath the door. He knocked gently. Lily opened the door, surprised to find Robert standing there. She was wearing new pajamas emblazoned with the solar system, one of countless items Robert had purchased during their first proper shopping trip after her arrival. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head, then gestured for him to enter. The room had been transformed in recent weeks. Bookshelves overflowed with volumes on mathematics, astronomy, and sign language. A telescope pointed through the window toward the night sky. On the desk sat the model of the solar system Victoria had sent, the latest mysterious gift. "You've been looking at it," Robert observed. Lily nodded, then reached for a notepad where she'd written, "The markings on Mars match where my mom worked on the rover project. It's a message." Robert stared at her in surprise. "How do you know that?" She wrote again, "Mom kept her NASA certificates hidden in our apartment. I found them after she got sick. She never told me, just like Mason's mom never told him." Robert sat heavily on the edge of the bed, struck by the parallel. Two brilliant women who had hidden their true selves from their children. Elizabeth Carter, who had concealed her extraordinary mind, and Victoria, who had concealed her very existence. "Lily," he said carefully, "what if Victoria isn't what Mason hopes she'll be? What if meeting her hurts him more?" Lily considered this, then wrote deliberately, "Not knowing hurts worse than any truth." From the wisdom of a child who had faced more loss than most adults, Robert recognized the simple truth. Mason deserved answers, whatever pain might come with them, and Robert would be there to support his son through it all, something he should have done from the beginning. The next morning, Robert instructed his legal team to arrange a meeting with Victoria Hartwell, with full security protocols and psychological support for Mason. Within hours, they received an unexpected response from Victoria's attorney. She was already on her way to New York. The private airfield outside Manhattan gleamed under November sunshine as Robert's car approached, flanked by FBI vehicles. In the back seat, Mason sat rigidly between Robert and Agent Cooper, his hands folded tightly in his lap. Lily had wanted to come, but Robert had gently insisted this first meeting be kept to immediate family members only, a decision Mason had supported with surprising maturity. "Remember," Agent Cooper said as the car slowed, You can end this meeting at any time. Just signal me and we'll leave immediately." Mason nodded without looking at her, his eyes fixed on the sleek private jet taxiing toward the hangar. After 12 years believing his mother was dead, he was minutes away from seeing her in person. The psychological counselor had prepared him for a range of emotions: anger, confusion, joy, disappointment. But sitting beside his son, Robert recognized something in Mason's expression he hadn't anticipated: determination. The jet came to a stop. Stairs were positioned, and the door opened. Robert held his breath as a figure appeared in the doorway, hesitating momentarily before descending. Victoria Hartwell, still legibly the woman he had loved, despite the passage of years, stepped onto American soil for the first time since her death. She wore a simple blue dress and carried no luggage, as though prepared for the possibility she might not be staying long. Her eyes scanned the waiting vehicles until she found Robert and Mason, and for a moment she simply stood, drinking in the sight of her son. Mason's hand found Robert's and squeezed tightly. With FBI agents flanking her, Victoria approached the car. Agent Cooper exited first, introduced herself officially, and opened the door for Mason and Robert. Mason stepped out, his father close behind. Mother and son stood facing each other, separated by 12 years of deception and 3 feet of concrete. Neither moved. Then Victoria raised her hands and began to sign. "Hello, Mason. I've missed you every day." Mason's eyes widened in shock. His mother knew sign language, fluent, confident sign language. Before he could respond, Victoria continued signing. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know the truth." Robert watched in astonishment as his ex-wife communicated effortlessly in the language he was still struggling to learn. When had she acquired this skill? Why had she bothered to learn signing if she never intended to be part of Mason's life? Mason's hands finally moved in response. "You let me think you were dead. You let me think I killed you." Victoria flinched as though struck. "No," she signed emphatically. "Never. That was never supposed to happen." "Then what was supposed to happen?" Robert demanded aloud, his voice tight with controlled fury. Victoria turned to him, her expression complicated by emotions he couldn't decipher. "Can we continue this conversation somewhere private, please?" And the somewhere private turned out to be a secure FBI facility in Manhattan, a nondescript office building with interrogation rooms repurposed as meeting spaces. Mason, Robert, and Victoria sat at a conference table, with Agent Cooper observing from a corner and a certified ASL interpreter present to ensure nothing was misunderstood. Victoria began her explanation, alternating between speech for Robert and sign for Mason. "After Mason was born and diagnosed as deaf, Marcus approached me with what he called a business proposal," she began. "He said Robert would never accept a disabled child, that eventually you would send Mason away to an institution as your own father had threatened to do with your sister." Robert started in shock. "My sister? I don't have a sister." Victoria's eyes widened. "Elaine? Your older sister who was born with severe learning disabilities? Your father sent her to a residential facility when you were too young to remember. Marcus showed me the records." "That's a lie," Robert insisted, though a cold uncertainty crept through him. His father had been a harsh, unforgiving man who rarely spoke of family matters. Could there be truth to this? "Marcus convinced me that the only way to protect Mason was to remove him from your influence entirely," Victoria continued. "The plan was to fake my death during childbirth, then have you declared an unfit parent due to extreme grief. Marcus would be appointed guardian and he would bring Mason to me. We would raise him together, using the trust fund to provide everything he needed." "But that's not what happened," Mason signed, his expression stony. "No," Victoria acknowledged, her hands trembling slightly. "After my death, Marcus told me you had become obsessively protective of Mason, that you'd threatened to destroy anyone who tried to take him from you. He said we needed to wait until you were more vulnerable. So you abandoned your infant son based on the word of a manipulative liar, Robert stated flatly. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I believed I was protecting him. Marcus showed me documents, therapy reports, evidence that you were unraveling. Each time I insisted on contacting Mason, he produced new reasons why it was too dangerous. And the money? Agent Cooper interjected. The regular payments from Whitfield? My prison, Victoria answered bitterly. At first, they were supposedly from the trust fund, Mason's money, being held for when we could be reunited. Later, when I began to question Marcus's story, they became leverage. If I tried to contact Mason independently, Marcus would expose me as a fraud who had abandoned her child and stolen millions. Robert studied his ex-wife, searching for deception, but finding only regret. When did you realize Marcus was lying about me? When Mason was 8, Victoria signed and spoke simultaneously. I managed to access news articles about you both. You weren't the unstable, potentially abusive father Marcus had described. You were devoted to Mason's education, if somewhat remote emotionally. Then why wait 4 more years to make contact? Robert demanded. Fear, she admitted simply. By then, I was complicit in a massive fraud. Marcus made it clear that if I approached you, I'd go to prison and never see Mason at all. She turned to her son, her signs emphatic. But I never stopped trying to find a way back to you. I learned sign language. I studied deaf education. I prepared for the day we might reunite. Mason had remained silent throughout her explanation, his face unreadable. Now finally, his hands moved in a direct question. Did you send the gifts? Victoria nodded. When Marcus disappeared 3 months ago, the payments stopped. I realized something had happened, that this might be my only chance. I sent things that might help you understand who I am, and that I never forgot you. The model of the solar system, Mason signed, with the markings on Mars. What does it mean? Adieu. A faint smile touched Victoria's lips. It was a message that I had a friend who could help us, Elizabeth Carter. We met years ago through Marcus. He dated her briefly before her cancer diagnosis. When I learned her daughter was now living with you and Mason, I knew it couldn't be coincidence. Robert stared at her in confusion. Are you saying Marcus knew Lily's mother? More than knew, Victoria replied grimly. I believe he's the reason she lost everything. And I think I know why he was so interested in Mason's medical records. She leaned forward, her expression deadly serious. Robert, there's something about Mason's condition you need to know. Something Marcus has known all along. Mason isn't deaf because of genetics or birth trauma, Victoria explained, her words falling into the sterile room like stones. He's deaf because he was deliberately exposed to an experimental compound during my pregnancy. Robert felt as though the air had been sucked from the room. What are you saying? Marcus was involved with a pharmaceutical company developing drugs for enhanced neural plasticity, Victoria continued, her hands signing for Mason while she spoke. The research was promising, but ethically questionable. Human trials weren't approved, so they looked for alternative methods of testing. He used you as a test subject? Agent Cooper asked, her professional composure slipping. Victoria nodded grimly. He added the compound to my prenatal vitamins. I didn't know until years later, when I found documents in his New Zealand office. By then, the damage was done. Mason's hands moved in agitated signs. Are you saying Uncle Marcus made me deaf on purpose? Victoria's face crumpled with the pain of this revelation. Yes, but not to harm you. The compound was supposed to enhance cognitive function, particularly spatial reasoning and pattern recognition. Deafness was an unexpected side effect in some animal subjects, but the cognitive enhancements were consistent. He experimented on an unborn child, Robert said, his voice dangerously quiet. My son. Our son, Victoria corrected gently. And Elizabeth Carter's daughter too, I believe. The room went still. Lily? Robert asked. What about her? Elizabeth worked for the same pharmaceutical company after leaving NASA, Victoria explained. She was a data analyst for their clinical trials. I think she discovered what they were doing, what they'd done to Mason and potentially other children. When she threatened to expose them, they destroyed her career and finances. The cancer? Agent Cooper asked. Victoria shook her head. That was real. But the company made sure her insurance was insufficient, that her savings disappeared in investment failures. They wanted her discredited and desperate before she could speak out. Robert thought of Lily, brilliant, observant Lily, who had learned sign language with remarkable speed, who recognized patterns others missed. Are you suggesting Lily might have been exposed to this compound too? I don't know, Victoria admitted. But her mother's connection to the company, her unusual cognitive abilities, her immediate bond with Mason, it seems possible. Mason had gone very still, his expression unreadable as he processed these revelations. Finally, his hands moved in deliberate signs. Is this why I can see patterns others can't? Why I noticed the contract switch when no one else did? Victoria nodded. The compound enhances certain neural pathways. Mason, what happened to you was wrong. Profoundly wrong, but your abilities are extraordinary. You see the world in ways others can't. Does Marcus want me because of these abilities? Mason signed, his expression hardening. Is that why he was studying my medical records? I believe so, Victoria confirmed. The pharmaceutical company's research was shut down after too many adverse outcomes, but Marcus never abandoned the concept. He's been tracking your development, collecting data. I think he sees you as proof his concept works, and possibly as the key to refining it. Robert struggled to process the enormity of these revelations. His trusted partner of decades had poisoned his pregnant wife, causing their child's deafness, had orchestrated an elaborate fraud to separate mother and child, had systematically stolen millions while grooming Mason for some unknown purpose. We need to run tests, Agent Cooper said, breaking the stunned silence. With your permission, we should evaluate both Mason and Lily. If this compound exists, we need to understand its effects. And potential side effects, Robert added darkly. What else might this drug have done? Are there health risks we don't know about? Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I've spent years researching this, Robert. The cognitive enhancements appear stable, with no progressive deterioration. But there are other potential issues: difficulty regulating emotional responses, occasional sensory processing challenges. Mason's hands flew in angry signs. So I'm some kind of experiment? A lab rat? No, Victoria signed emphatically. You are my son. A brilliant, courageous boy who has overcome enormous challenges. What was done to you was unconscionable, but it doesn't define you. Robert watched his son struggle with this new understanding of his identity, of the deliberate nature of his deafness. He reached out, placing his hand gently on Mason's shoulder. Your mother is right, he said, signing the words he had practiced for this meeting. This changes nothing about who you are. But it changes everything about finding Marcus. He's not just a thief. He's someone who experimented on children. He belongs in prison. Mason looked between his parents. These two people who had each failed him in different ways, one through absence, one through emotional distance. Yet here they were, united in their determination to protect him now. What about Lily? He signed. If she was exposed too, she needs to know. Robert nodded. We'll tell her together, and we'll have doctors examine both of you, not to treat you as experiments, but to ensure there are no health concerns we should address. Where will you stay? He asked Victoria, the question hanging awkwardly between them. I've arranged a hotel, she replied. "The FBI has restricted my movements pending their investigation into my role in Marcus's fraud. I don't expect—" "Stay at the penthouse," Robert interrupted, surprising himself. "There's a guest suite on the lower level. If Mason wants to get to know you, it should be in a comfortable environment." Victoria's expression registered shock, then cautious hope. "Are you sure?" "No," Robert admitted honestly, "but Mason deserves the chance to know his mother, and we need to present a united front against Marcus." As they prepared to leave the facility, Mason tugged at Robert's sleeve, pulling him slightly away from the others. His hands moved in signs only his father would see. "Did you ever love her?" The question caught Robert off guard with its simplicity and depth. He nodded slowly. "Very much. Her loss, or what I thought was her loss, nearly destroyed me." Mason considered this, then signed again. "Do you think you could forgive her someday?" Robert looked at Victoria, the woman he had mourned for 12 years, the mother of his child, the unwitting accomplice in an unforgivable experiment. "I don't know," he signed honestly, "but I'm willing to try. For you." Mason's response was unexpected. He wrapped his arms around his father in a fierce hug, perhaps their first genuine embrace since he was a toddler. When he stepped back, his signs were determined. "Then I'll try too." As they left the building, Victoria walking slightly apart from them, Robert's phone buzzed with a message from James. "Mr. Hartwell, River Valley Academy Security reports a breach in their systems. Someone has been accessing Mason and Lily's admission files." Marcus was getting closer. Whatever his plans for Mason, and possibly for Lily, he was still actively pursuing them. The race to understand the children's condition before he made his move had become urgent. What none of them realized was that Lily, waiting anxiously at the penthouse, had already begun piecing together the truth from her mother's hidden papers and from her own increasingly vivid memories of the special vitamins her mother had been instructed to give her throughout early childhood. The penthouse living room had never felt so crowded with tension. Lily sat between Mason and Robert on the sofa, while Victoria perched uncomfortably on an adjacent chair. Agent Cooper stood near the windows, maintaining professional distance while remaining vigilant. On the coffee table lay medical files, research notes, and a worn journal bearing Elizabeth Carter's name. "I found it hidden in the lining of my mother's old backpack," Lily explained, her small voice steady despite the enormity of what she was sharing. "After she got sick, she told me to keep the backpack safe, but she never said why. I've carried it everywhere since then." Victoria leaned forward, examining the journal's pages filled with complex mathematical notations and chemical formulas. "These are observations about neural pathway development," she murmured. "Elizabeth was documenting the effects of the compound on her own daughter." "She wasn't just documenting them," Agent Cooper corrected, pointing to a particular notation. "She was developing a counter-agent, something to stabilize the neurological changes without losing the cognitive enhancements." Robert watched Lily's face for signs of distress, but found only determined curiosity. Unlike Mason, who had reacted to yesterday's revelations with understandable anger and confusion, Lily seemed almost relieved to have confirmation of what she had apparently suspected for some time. "My mom said I was special," she said simply. "That I could see things others couldn't. I thought she meant I had a good imagination." Mason's hands moved in signs that Lily immediately understood. "Did you know you were part of an experiment?" She shook her head. "Not until now, but I knew something was different about me. The other kids at school couldn't understand how I learned things so quickly. My teachers thought I was cheating on tests." Elizabeth must have discovered what was happening and joined the pharmaceutical company to investigate from within, Victoria theorized. These notes suggest she identified at least 12 children who were exposed to the compound during gestation or early development. 12 children, Robert repeated, the number landing heavily. 12 families whose lives were altered without their knowledge or consent. Agent Cooper's phone buzzed. with an incoming message. She checked it, her expression tightening. "We've identified a property in upstate New York registered to one of Whitfield's shell companies. Satellite imagery shows recent activity, deliveries of medical equipment, security enhancements. He's setting up a lab," Victoria concluded grimly. "He's never abandoned his research. Finding these children, studying them, has been his obsession for years." "But why now?" Robert questioned. "Why increase his activities right when his fraud was exposed?" Victoria exchanged a significant look with Agent Cooper before answering. "The compound has a unique property. While the neural enhancements manifest in childhood, there's a secondary development phase that occurs during puberty. Based on Elizabeth's notes and what I've observed in Mason, the spatial reasoning and pattern recognition abilities intensify dramatically between ages 12 and 14. Mason, who had been following the conversation through the interpreter, signed rapidly. "I'm 12, Lily is 10. "Exactly," Victoria confirmed. "Mason is entering the secondary development phase now. Marcus has been waiting for this moment, tracking Mason's development through his medical records, preparing to observe and document the next stage of enhancement." Robert felt cold dread settle in his stomach. And when Lily exposed his contract switch, she demonstrated similar abilities. "So now he's interested in both children. We need to move them," Agent Cooper stated decisively. "The penthouse security is excellent, but we'd be safer relocating to a more secure facility until Whitfield is apprehended." "No!" Mason signed emphatically. "No more hiding, no more running." He looked at Lily, who nodded in silent agreement. "Mason," Robert began, but his son cut him off with rapid signs. "This man poisoned me before I was born. He separated me from my mother. He's the reason Lily lost everything. I won't let him control where we go or how we live." Robert recognized the stubborn set of his son's jaw, the same expression he saw in his own mirror on difficult business days. For 12 years, he had viewed Mason's deafness as a vulnerability to be protected. Now he was beginning to understand it was merely one aspect of an extraordinary child whose courage far exceeded his own. "What do you propose?" Robert asked, surprising everyone with his willingness to consider Mason's perspective. Mason exchanged a quick glance with Lily before signing his response. "We go to River Valley Academy as planned, but we use ourselves as bait." A chorus of objections erupted from the adults, but Mason continued signing determinedly. "Marcus wants to observe us? Let him think he has the opportunity. The school already has enhanced security because of us. We add more, security that looks for him specifically. When he approaches, you catch him." Victoria translated Mason's proposal for Robert and Agent Cooper, her expression caught between maternal concern and reluctant admiration. "It's too dangerous," she argued. "He's already demonstrated he's willing to go to extreme lengths." "Which is why traditional protection measures might fail," Agent Cooper said thoughtfully. "A proactive approach has certain advantages, especially with subjects who—" She caught herself. "With children who are highly observant and capable of recognizing threats." Robert studied his son, seeing him truly for perhaps the first time, not as a fragile child to be sheltered, but as a young man of extraordinary ability and determination. Mason had inherited not just Robert's features, but his strategic mind and unwavering resolve. If, and this is a significant if, we were to consider this approach, Robert said carefully, it would require extensive planning and multiple layers of protection. "Of course," Mason signed confidently. "I'm not suggesting we make it easy for him, just that we stop hiding and start hunting." Lily, who had been quietly absorbing the conversation, finally spoke. "My mom was trying to protect me by hiding her research, but in the end, hiding didn't save her. It just meant she died without anyone understanding what she was fighting for." Her voice quavered slightly, but her gaze remained steady. "I don't want to hide any more either." The room fell silent, as the adults considered the children's perspective. It was Agent Cooper who finally broke the impasse. "We could establish a controlled environment," she suggested. "The Academy has agreed to additional security measures already. With proper surveillance, undercover agents, and continuous monitoring, we could create a scenario where Whitfield believes he has an opening while actually entering a carefully constructed trap." "The FBI would sanction this?" Robert asked skeptically. "With appropriate safeguards, yes," Agent Cooper confirmed. "We've used similar approaches in cases involving high-profile targets who have proven elusive to traditional methods." Victoria looked stricken. "You're talking about using children as bait." "No," Mason signed emphatically. "We're talking about taking back control. About refusing to let him make us live in fear." Robert found himself torn between his instinct to protect Mason at all costs and his growing recognition of his son's autonomy and insight. For 12 years, he had made decisions about Mason's life with minimal input from the boy himself, decisions rooted in his own fears and limitations. Perhaps it was time to listen. "We develop a comprehensive plan," Robert said finally, "with multiple fail-safes and exit strategies. Nothing proceeds without complete confidence in the children's safety." Mason beamed, signing "thank you" with emphatic hands. As they began outlining parameters for this unconventional approach, Robert's phone chimed with an encrypted message from his security team. Surveillance cameras had captured a figure matching Marcus Whitfield's description near the River Valley Academy campus. The choice had effectively been made for them. Marcus was already closing in. The question now was not whether to confront him, but how to ensure the children's safety when the inevitable confrontation occurred. What none of them anticipated was how quickly Marcus would move, or that he already had allies inside their trusted circle. River Valley Academy's winter campus glittered under fresh snow as Mason and Lily arrived for their first day. Their enrollment had been accelerated despite security concerns, with a small army of undercover agents now embedded throughout the school, as maintenance workers, cafeteria staff, and even substitute teachers. "Remember," Robert signed to Mason as they stood in the dormitory hallway, "check in every 3 hours. No exceptions." Mason nodded, though his attention had already shifted to the busy student life around them. After years of isolation with private tutors, the vibrant school environment called to him like a siren. "We'll be fine, mister." "Hartwell," Lily assured him, her new backpack, stuffed with books rather than meager belongings, slung over one shoulder. In the weeks since the revelations about their shared medical histories, she had grown more confident, embracing her abilities rather than hiding them. Victoria approached, carrying Mason's final bag. The uneasy truce between Robert and his not-dead ex-wife remained fragile, but they had achieved a functioning co-parenting relationship with remarkable speed. "Your tracking devices are activated," she reminded the children quietly. "Any sign of Marcus? Anything unusual at all? You alert us immediately." Mason rolled his eyes in the universal teenage gesture of exasperation, though he had technically only entered adolescence a month earlier. "We know the protocols," he signed. "We helped design them." Robert watched his son with a mixture of pride and trepidation. Mason had indeed been instrumental in crafting the security measures now surrounding them, demonstrating strategic thinking that impressed even veteran FBI agents. As the parents prepared to leave, Mason surprised Victoria with a quick hug. Their relationship remained tentative, filled with awkward moments and unanswered questions, but genuine affection had begun to grow between them. "Be safe," Victoria signed, her eyes bright with unshed tears. As the adults walked away, Agent Cooper approached from her post disguised as an administrative assistant. "Everything set?" she asked. Robert nodded tensely. "As much as it can be. Is there any update on Marcus's location?" "Nothing concrete since the sighting near campus last week," Cooper admitted. But we've identified 3 staff members with financial connections to his shell companies. We're watching them closely. The plan was in motion. Now they could only wait and hope they hadn't underestimated their adversary. Inside their respective dormitories, Mason and Lily were settling into their new rooms when both of their tablets simultaneously pinged with the same message. Welcome to River Valley. The real education begins now. Within 2 weeks, Mason and Lily had transformed from nervous newcomers to the talk of River Valley Academy. Their academic performance astonished teachers, while their unusual background, the millionaire's son and the formerly homeless girl, both with extraordinary abilities, made them objects of intense curiosity among fellow students. "And they're staring again," Lily signed to Mason as they sat together in the dining hall. They had taken to communicating exclusively through ASL, creating a private space in the midst of the bustling school. Mason shrugged. "Let them. We've got bigger concerns." Their bigger concerns included maintaining constant vigilance while attempting to experience something resembling normal school life. Each day brought a carefully orchestrated routine, classes, meals, study sessions, all under the watchful eyes of undercover agents and security cameras. "Notice anything unusual about Dr. Ferris?" Mason asked, referring to their science teacher. Lily nodded slightly. "He asked too many questions about our cognitive tests yesterday, and he was looking at my test results when I came back for my notebook." Dr. Alan Ferris had joined the faculty just before their arrival, his impressive credentials and references passing the school's background check. But something about the intense interest he took in Mason and Lily had triggered their suspicions. "Dad said they've increased surveillance on him," Mason signed, "but they haven't found anything concrete yet." As they discussed their observations, Headmistress Farrow approached their table. "Mason, Lily, I hope you're settling in well." Both children nodded politely. "Excellent. Dr. Ferris has recommended you both for the Advanced Science Symposium this weekend. It's a wonderful opportunity to work with visiting researchers on complex problem-solving tasks." Mason's fingers tensed, ready to decline, but Lily subtly touched his wrist, their private signal to proceed carefully. "That sounds interesting," Lily said aloud, while signing simultaneously for Mason's benefit. "Who else will be participating?" "Just 4 other students. It's quite selective," the headmistress explained proudly. "The symposium will be held in the East Wing Laboratory Complex. Dr. Ferris will provide all the details tomorrow." After she left, Mason and Lily exchanged meaningful glances. The East Wing was the newest addition to campus, and the only area where security cameras had experienced periodic technical difficulties in recent days. "It's happening," Mason signed, his hands quick with excitement and apprehension. "This has to be Marcus's move." Lily nodded solemnly. "We need to tell your parents, but not here." They waited until their mandatory outdoor recreation period, when they could speak without being overheard. Agent Cooper, disguised as a groundskeeper, met them behind the athletic equipment shed. "The Science Symposium is the trap," Mason signed rapidly while Lily translated. "It's too perfect. Isolated location, selective invitation, led by the teacher we already suspected." Agent Cooper frowned. "We've been monitoring Dr. Ferris for days. His background is legitimate, Harvard PhD, research positions at major universities. Could Marcus have created a false identity that thorough?" Lily asked. "Possibly," Cooper admitted, "but it's more likely he's using a legitimate person who's been compromised or recruited." "Either way," Mason signed emphatically, "this is our chance to catch him. We need to accept the invitation and prepare." Cooper studied the determined faces of these remarkable children, their extraordinary abilities matched only by their courage. "I'll discuss it with your parents and the security team. If we proceed, you'll both be wearing enhanced tracking and audio monitoring." As they separated, Mason felt a strange sense of anticipation rather than fear. After a lifetime of being protected and sheltered, he was finally taking action, confronting the man who had altered the course of his life before he was even born. What he didn't yet realize was that the science symposium was merely a diversion, and that Marcus Whitfield had already infiltrated River Valley Academy in a way none of them had anticipated. The morning of the science symposium arrived with a fresh dusting of snow and heightened security protocols. Robert and Victoria had relocated to a hotel 10 minutes from campus, while FBI tactical teams maintained positions throughout the school grounds. Inside Mason and Lily's clothing, advanced tracking devices monitored not only their locations, but their vital signs. "I still don't like this," Robert muttered as he watched surveillance feeds from their hotel room command center. On the screens, Mason walked confidently toward the East Wing, while Lily approached from her dormitory on the opposite side of campus. "None of us like it," Victoria replied, her eyes never leaving the monitor showing their son. But Mason was right. This is our best opportunity to catch Marcus. Agent Cooper entered with updated intelligence. "We've verified the identities of all symposium participants and the 2 faculty supervisors. Background checks are clean, but we're taking nothing for granted. Teams are in position to move the moment we identify Whitfield or any suspicious activity. The plan was for the children to participate normally while remaining alert for anything unusual. At the first sign of danger, they would activate their emergency signals, prompting immediate extraction. Mason reached the laboratory first, finding Dr. Ferris arranging materials at 6 workstations. The room was large and well-equipped, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the snow-covered campus. "Mason, welcome." Dr. Ferris greeted him with signs that were surprisingly fluent. "Please take workstation 3. We'll begin once everyone arrives." Mason nodded politely while scanning the room for potential threats or escape routes, just as he'd been trained. Nothing seemed immediately suspicious, though he noted the unusual amount of electronic equipment present for what was supposedly a chemistry demonstration. Lily arrived next, followed by the 4 other selected students, all exceptional performers in science and mathematics. As they settled at their stations, Dr. Ferris began explaining the day's challenge, analyzing chemical compounds and identifying patterns in their molecular structures. "This is a university-level exercise," Dr. Ferris explained, his enthusiasm appearing genuine, "but I believe you're all capable of exceptional insights." The work began innocuously enough. The first hour passed with normal scientific activities, mixing solutions, recording reactions, analyzing data. Mason and Lily exchanged occasional glances, their private sign language conveying mutual confusion. If this was Marcus's trap, it was remarkably subtle. Then, during the mid-morning break, their tablets simultaneously chimed with identical messages. "Second floor, west corridor, equipment closet, come alone or they die." Mason's blood ran cold as he showed Lily the message. Their emergency signals were designed to be triggered discreetly, but with Dr. Ferris watching them closely, any unusual movement risked alerting him. Using their private signs, Mason communicated rapidly, "Distraction needed. Count of 3. Lily nodded imperceptibly. Then on Mason's silent count, she gasped loudly and knocked over her beaker, sending blue liquid spreading across the workstation. "I'm so sorry!" she exclaimed as Dr. Ferris rushed over with paper towels. In the momentary chaos, Mason activated his emergency signal. Within seconds, Agent Cooper's voice came through his nearly invisible earpiece. "Signal received, stay put. Do not go to the location mentioned." But then Lily's tablet displayed a new message, this one including a live video feed of Robert and Victoria, unconscious and bound to chairs in what appeared to be a maintenance room. A timer showed 10:00, counting down. Mason felt the blood drain from his face as he showed Lily the screen. They had prepared for many scenarios, but not this one. not their parents being used as leverage. With Dr. Ferris still distracted by the spill, Mason signed rapidly to Lily. "West Corridor, now, together." As they slipped from the laboratory, Mason's mind raced. If their parents had been taken, the entire security operation was compromised. They were truly on their own, and they had less than 10 minutes to make an impossible choice. "This has to be a trap," Lily signed as they hurried down the empty hallway toward the West Corridor. Classes were in session, leaving the normally bustling school eerily quiet. "Of course it's a trap," Mason replied, his hands moving sharply with tension. "But did you see the video? That wasn't fake." Agent Cooper's voice crackled urgently through their earpieces. "Return to the laboratory immediately. This is a direct order." Mason hesitated for only a moment before reaching up and removing the device, motioning for Lily to do the same. Their tracking devices were sewn into their clothing, harder to discard without being noticed, but at least now they wouldn't have to listen to commands they couldn't obey. The equipment closet was located in a secluded section of the West Corridor, away from classrooms. As they approached, Mason signaled Lily to stop, pointing to a nearly invisible tripwire across the doorway. Together, they carefully stepped over it. Inside, the small room was empty except for a tablet propped against a stack of printer paper. On the screen, the video of their captive parents continued to play, the timer now showing 7:42 and counting down. "Welcome, Mason. Lily." The message appeared as text across the bottom of the screen. "Follow these instructions precisely if you want them to survive." Below appeared a list of directions to a maintenance tunnel entrance behind the school's auditorium, with the warning, "Come alone, no devices. You have 7 minutes to reach the entrance." "They'll be monitoring the security cameras," Lily signed. "We need to avoid being seen." Mason nodded grimly. After years of navigating the world silently, he had developed an instinctive understanding of how to move undetected. He motioned toward an air vent near the floor, large enough for both children to crawl through. Working together, they quickly removed the cover and entered the dusty passage. Mason led the way, having memorized the school's floor plans during security briefings. The ventilation system would take them near the auditorium while bypassing main corridors and their cameras. As they crawled through the cramped space, Lily tapped Mason's foot to get his attention. When he turned, she signed with difficulty in the narrow passage. "This doesn't make sense. How did they get to your parents with all the security?" Mason's expression darkened as he signed back, "Inside, help. Someone we trust." The horrible reality had been forming in his mind since seeing the video. The security protocols had been meticulous, the surveillance constant. Only someone with intimate knowledge of their plans could have circumvented everything so completely. After several minutes of uncomfortable crawling, they reached a vent overlooking a storage area behind the auditorium. Mason peered through the slats, confirming the space was empty before carefully removing the cover. They dropped silently to the floor, immediately spotting the maintenance tunnel entrance, a heavy metal door with a keypad lock. On the wall beside it hung a school maintenance uniform with a note attached. "Put this on, one of you. It's for passing security cameras inside the tunnel," Lily realized aloud. Mason grabbed the uniform and quickly pulled it over his clothes. The timer on their discarded tablet had shown less than 4 minutes remaining when they entered the ventilation system. They had to hurry. The keypad presented their next challenge. Without access to their tablets or phones, they had no way to receive the code. Then Mason noticed a small mathematical equation scrawled in nearly invisible ink beside the keypad. "It's a test," he signed to Lily. "The code is the answer." Lily studied the complex equation, her mind working through the variables with remarkable speed. "Try 35813, she suggested after just seconds. Mason punched in the numbers, holding his breath. The light turned green, and the heavy door unlocked with a metallic click. Beyond lay a dimly lit concrete tunnel stretching into darkness. They exchanged a final glance. Two children walking deliberately into danger, their extraordinary abilities their only weapons. "Ready?" Mason signed. Lily nodded, her expression resolute. "For your parents. For both of us." They stepped through the doorway, unaware that their actions had triggered a silent alarm in the FBI command center, or that Agent Cooper was already racing toward their last known position, desperately trying to prevent what she now recognized was an elaborately orchestrated abduction. The maintenance tunnel door closed behind them with a final ominous thud. The tunnel stretched endlessly before them, lit by widely spaced emergency bulbs that cast more shadows than light. Mason led the way, the oversized maintenance uniform hanging loosely on his small frame. Lily followed close behind, counting their steps to track distance, a habit she'd developed during her homeless months to navigate the city. 600 steps, she signed when Mason glanced back. "We've gone about half a mile." The school's security briefings had never mentioned tunnels of this length. Clearly, someone had deliberately omitted this information from the protective measures surrounding them. The passage eventually opened into a larger junction with 3 branching corridors. On the wall hung a phone with a note, "Call for instructions." Mason hesitated, suspecting another trap, but they had no alternative. He lifted the receiver and immediately heard a familiar voice. "Mason, well done, my boy." Marcus Whitfield, the voice that had featured in Mason's life since infancy. The trusted Uncle Marcus, who had betrayed them all. "I've prepared a special laboratory for you and Lily," Marcus continued smoothly. "Take the center passage and proceed to the elevator at the end. Your parents' timer has been paused, but will resume if you deviate from these instructions." Mason looked at Lily, who had been watching his face intently. He signed Marcus's instructions, and they silently debated their options. Every instinct screamed that they were walking deeper into danger, yet turning back meant abandoning their parents. "We keep going," Mason finally signed, "but stay alert for any opportunity." The center passage led to a modern elevator that seemed jarringly out of place in the rough-hewn tunnel. Inside, there was only one button. When Mason pressed it, the elevator descended smoothly and rapidly, suggesting they were traveling far below the school campus. When the doors opened, they found themselves in a sterile white corridor that looked more like a research facility than a school basement. Clinical lighting illuminated the passage, which ended at a set of double doors marked Neurocognitive Assessment Laboratory. "I don't like this," Lily signed, her hands trembling slightly. Mason squeezed her shoulder reassuringly, though his own heart pounded with fear and adrenaline. Together, they approached the doors, which slid open automatically as they neared. The laboratory beyond was extensive and cutting-edge, with advanced medical equipment and multiple computer workstations. In the center stood Marcus Whitfield, impeccably dressed as always, his silver hair perfectly styled despite being a fugitive for months. "Welcome to where it all began," he greeted them, his voice warm as though welcoming favored guests. "This facility was the original testing site for the neural enhancement compound. How fitting that you both should return here." Mason's hands flew in angry signs. "Where are my parents?" "They're quite safe," Marcus assured him, gesturing to a large monitor where Robert and Victoria could be seen, still restrained but now conscious, in what appeared to be a secure room. "Cooperation ensures they remain that way." "What do you want from us?" Lily asked, her voice small but steady. Marcus smiled indulgently. "To complete what we started, of course. You two represent the most successful applications of the compound, Mason with his extraordinary pattern recognition and spatial abilities, and Lily with her astonishing linguistic talent and mathematical processing. The secondary development phase has begun in Mason and will soon begin in you, Lily. This is a crucial observation period. You poisoned us, Mason signed furiously, with Lily translating aloud. You caused my deafness. You destroyed Lily's mother's life. Regrettable side effects, Marcus acknowledged without a hint of remorse. The compound needed refinement. Elizabeth Carter was developing a modified version that would preserve the cognitive enhancements without the sensory disruptions. Her research was nearly complete when she fell ill. He approached a workstation and pulled up complex molecular diagrams. With your help, I can finish what she started. Imagine a world where every child could have your gifts without the limitations. You two are the templates for the next evolution of human cognition. As he spoke, Mason surveyed the laboratory, noting cameras, security panels, and potential exits. Most importantly, he observed the electronic keypad controlling the door to the room where his parents were held. "What exactly do you want us to do?" Lily asked, strategically keeping Marcus talking while Mason gathered information. "Simple cognitive assessments to begin with," Marcus explained, indicating 2 testing stations equipped with specialized headsets. "I need baseline measurements of your current abilities before we proceed to more advanced evaluations." Mason and Lily exchanged glances, silently communicating their understanding. They were deep underground, cut off from any help, with their parents' lives as leverage. Their only hope was to comply temporarily while looking for any advantage. "We'll cooperate," Mason signed, his face deliberately impassive. "But we want to see our parents in person first." Marcus studied them thoughtfully before nodding. "A reasonable request. 5 minutes supervised." As he led them toward the secured room, Mason's mind worked furiously, analyzing patterns and possibilities, just as the compound had enhanced him to do. There had to be a weakness in Marcus's plan, a variable he hadn't accounted for. What Marcus didn't know was that Mason had already spotted it. In the reflection of a glass cabinet, barely visible but unmistakable to his trained eye, was a maintenance hatch labeled Emergency Access, and its electronic lock displayed the same type of mathematical equation they had encountered earlier. Their opportunity would come. They just had to wait for the right moment. Robert strained against his restraints as Mason and Lily were escorted into the holding room. His face bore a fresh bruise, suggesting he had already attempted resistance. "Mason, are you hurt?" Victoria signed frantically, her hands limited by the zip ties binding her wrists to the chair arms. "We're okay," Mason signed back, his eyes conveying a silent message. "Stay calm. Have a plan." Marcus allowed them to approach their parents but maintained a careful distance, one hand hovering near what appeared to be an alarm button on his belt. "You won't get away with this," Robert growled, his gaze never leaving Marcus's face. "Every law enforcement agency in the country is looking for you." "They've been looking for months," Marcus replied smoothly. "This facility doesn't exist on any official plans. It was constructed decades ago as a private research space, its connection to the school deliberately obscured." Victoria's eyes widened in recognition. "The original pharmaceutical trials. This is where they first developed the compound." "Precisely," Marcus confirmed. "When the company faced legal challenges, this facility was officially decommissioned. Unofficially, select research continued under private funding." As the adults spoke, Mason positioned himself where he could examine the room's security features while appearing to comfort his father. The door mechanism was sophisticated, a dual authentication system requiring both keycard and numeric code. Lily, meanwhile, had moved to Victoria's side, her small hands working subtly at her restraints while maintaining eye contact to distract from her actions. Years of surviving on the streets had taught her resourcefulness that even Marcus's meticulous planning couldn't anticipate. "Your 5 minutes are nearly up," Marcus announced. "Mason, Lily, if you cooperate fully with the testing, your parents will remain unharmed. Resistance will have immediate consequences." Mason signed his understanding, adding a private message to his parents when Marcus glanced away. "Trust us. Wait for signal." As they were led back to the main laboratory, Lily stumbled deliberately, falling against Marcus and using the momentary contact to slip Victoria's watch from his pocket. He had confiscated all of their personal items upon capture. The watch wasn't just a timepiece, but a sophisticated communication device developed by Robert's security team. In the laboratory, 2 testing stations awaited them, each with a specialized headset and monitoring equipment. "These will measure your neural responses to various stimuli," Marcus explained. "Nothing invasive for now." Mason seated himself reluctantly at the first station, watching as Lily did the same at the second. As they prepared to don the headsets, a subtle vibration came from the watch concealed in Lily's pocket, a signal that it had connected to the emergency beacon embedded in their tracking devices. Help was coming. They just needed to buy time. "Before we begin," Mason signed with Lily translating, "explain exactly what these tests will show. We deserve to understand what you're looking for." Marcus seemed pleased by the question, his scientific enthusiasm overtaking his caution. "The compound creates unique neural pathway configurations, essentially rewiring specific brain functions for enhanced performance. These tests will map those pathways, showing exactly how your brains process information differently than typical subjects." As he launched into a detailed explanation of neurocognitive markers and developmental thresholds, Mason caught Lily's eye and tapped his finger twice against the console, their signal to initiate their contingency plan. Lily casually adjusted her position, using the movement to press the emergency button on Victoria's watch. Immediately, a high-pitched alarm blared throughout the facility, and the laboratory lights shifted to pulsing red. "Containment breach in Sector 4, announced an automated voice. "Emergency protocols engaged." Marcus cursed, rushing to a control panel. "It's nothing, just a system malfunction. Stay where you are." But Mason and Lily were already moving. In the practiced motion they had rehearsed countless times during security drills, they executed their escape plan, not running for the exits, which would surely be secured, but toward the emergency maintenance hatch Mason had spotted earlier. As Marcus realized their intention and turned to pursue them, the facility's doors slid open to reveal an unexpected figure, Dr. Alan Ferris, holding not scientific equipment but a standard-issue FBI sidearm pointed directly at Marcus Whitfield. "FBI, hands where I can see them, Whitfield." Marcus froze, his expression shifting from confidence to cold calculation. "Agent Ferris, you've been busy playing schoolteacher. And you've been busy committing additional federal crimes." Ferris, or rather the undercover FBI agent who had been monitoring them all along, replied steadily. "Step away from the children." In the momentary standoff, Mason had reached the maintenance hatch and was solving the mathematical equation that would unlock it, their backup escape route if the FBI's intervention failed. What happened next occurred with stunning speed. Marcus activated something on his wristwatch, triggering a secondary alarm system. Steel barriers began descending from the ceiling, designed to compartmentalize the facility during emergencies. "This facility has self-destruct protocols," Marcus warned as he backed toward another exit. "A remnant from its classified origins. You have 3 minutes to evacuate before the containment charges detonate." Agent Ferris fired, but Marcus had already slipped through a concealed door that sealed instantly behind him. "We need to free my parents." Mason signed desperately as the barrier continued its descent, threatening to cut off access to the holding room. "This way!" Agent Ferris shouted, leading them toward a different passage. "There's another entrance to the holding cells. We have teams breaking in from multiple points." As they raced through the labyrinthine facility, Mason realized with cold clarity that despite all their planning and precautions, Marcus had still managed to outmaneuver them. Even now, he was likely escaping through some hidden exit, taking with him the research and data he had collected. The facility shuddered around them as the first containment charges detonated in distant sections. Their carefully constructed trap had failed, and now they were the ones fighting to escape. Smoke filled the corridors as Mason, Lily, and Agent Ferris navigated the deteriorating facility. Emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across their path. The children moved with surprising composure despite the chaos, their enhanced cognitive abilities allowing them to process and adapt to the crisis with exceptional clarity. "The holding room should be through here," Agent Ferris directed, gesturing toward a reinforced door at the end of the passage. Unlike the main entrance, this appeared to be a maintenance access point with a simpler locking mechanism. As they approached, the facility's intercom crackled to life with Marcus's voice. "I'm disappointed, Mason. I expected better from you. The compound should have helped you see the bigger picture." Mason ignored the taunt, focusing instead on the door before them. The locking panel displayed a complex sequence puzzle, another test designed to evaluate enhanced cognitive function while serving as security. "Can you bypass it?" Lily asked Agent Ferris, who was examining the mechanism with growing concern. "This isn't standard FBI training," he admitted. "This technology is advanced." Mason stepped forward, studying the pattern with intense concentration. His fingers moved across the display, rearranging digital segments with intuitive understanding. Within seconds, the lock disengaged with a satisfying click. Inside, they found Robert and Victoria already partially free, having worked together to loosen their restraints after Mason and Lily's departure. Victoria had managed to free one hand and was working on Robert's bindings. "Mason!" Victoria exclaimed, her free hand signing his name as she saw him enter. "No time," Agent Ferris interrupted, rushing to assist with the remaining restraints. "This place is coming down around us." Whitfield wasn't bluffing about the self-destruct system. As if to emphasize his point, a deep rumbling shook the room, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. The structural integrity of the underground facility was failing as sequential charges detonated through the complex. "Where's the nearest exit?" Robert demanded as he stood, rubbing circulation back into his wrists. Agent Ferris consulted a small device that displayed a schematic of the facility. "Main elevator is cut off. There's an emergency stairwell 2 corridors east, but—" He stopped, the schematic flashing red. "It's already compromised. Structural failure detected." "There's another way," Lily said suddenly, her voice quiet but certain. All eyes turned to her as she continued, "When I was translating for Mason earlier, I saw a map on one of the monitors. There's a maintenance tunnel that connects to the school's original foundation. It should lead to the old boiler room." "How do we find it?" Victoria asked. Lily closed her eyes briefly, visualizing the map she had glimpsed. "West corridor, second junction, access panel behind the electrical cabinet." No one questioned her recall. They had all witnessed the children's extraordinary abilities firsthand. As they moved through the failing facility, following Lily's directions, Mason tugged at Agent Ferris's sleeve and signed a question that had been bothering him. "How did you know we were here? Our tracking devices shouldn't work this far underground." "They don't," Ferris confirmed, signing his response while they walked. "But when you activated Victoria's watch, it sent a burst transmission through the facility's own communication system, essentially using Whitfield's network against him." Mason smiled grimly at the irony. The same technology Marcus had used to monitor them had become their salvation. They reached the electrical cabinet Lily had described, and Robert and Agent Ferris quickly moved it aside to reveal the hidden access panel. Beyond lay a narrow maintenance tunnel, barely large enough for an adult to navigate in a crouched position. "Kids first," Robert insisted, helping Mason and then Lily into the passage. Victoria followed, with Robert and Agent Ferris bringing up the rear. The tunnel was ancient, predating the research facility by decades. Support beams groaned ominously as more explosions rocked the complex behind them. They crawled forward in desperate silence, the adults struggling in the confined space that the children navigated more easily. After what seemed like an eternity, they reached a rusted ladder leading upward to a circular hatch. Mason climbed first, pushing against the heavy cover. For a terrifying moment, it refused to budge, then suddenly gave way, swinging upward to reveal the school's abandoned boiler room, just as Lily had predicted. One by one, they emerged into the musty space, coughing from dust and smoke. Through a small window, they could see FBI vehicles surrounding the school grounds and agents evacuating students and staff from the main buildings. "Marcus?" Robert asked Agent Ferris as they caught their breath. The agent shook his head grimly. No sign of him yet. He clearly had escape routes we didn't know about, but every law enforcement agency in the country has his biometrics now. It's only a matter of time. As they made their way outside to the organized chaos of the evacuation, Mason found himself searching the crowds, half expecting to see Marcus watching from some hidden vantage point. The man who had altered the course of so many lives, who had poisoned him before birth, separated him from his mother, and attempted to use him as a living experiment, remained elusive. But for the first time since learning the truth about his condition, Mason felt something unexpected: gratitude. Not for what had been done to him, but for what it had led to. His friendship with Lily, his reconnection with his mother, and most importantly, his father finally seeing him as he truly was. The compound had changed him, but the people who loved him had transformed him into something Marcus could never understand or control. A boy who was defined not by his enhancements or limitations, but by his choices and connections. As emergency vehicles arrived and medical personnel approached to check them for injuries, Mason took Lily's hand and signed a simple message: "We survived. Together." She nodded, signing back with equal simplicity: "Family." 6 weeks after the destruction of the underground facility, life had assumed a new normal. River Valley Academy had reopened following exhaustive security sweeps, with both Mason and Lily returning to classes under significantly reduced but still present protection. The FBI's investigation had uncovered the full scope of Marcus's operation, including evidence that at least 10 other children had been subjects of his experiments over the years. "The search for the other children continues," Agent Cooper explained during their weekly briefing in Robert's New York office. 3 have been identified so far, all exhibiting cognitive enhancements similar to Mason and Lily's, though with varying side effects. Victoria, now officially pardoned in exchange for her cooperation against Marcus, studied the files spread across the conference table. "Any sign of Marcus?" Agent Cooper shook her head. "Nothing concrete. We've frozen all his known accounts and properties, but he prepared for this contingency. Intelligence suggests he may have fled to a non-extradition country." Robert's expression hardened. "He won't stop. This research was his life's work." "Which is why security remains in place," Cooper agreed. "But we can't keep the children in a protective bubble forever." The phrase struck Robert forcefully. A protective bubble was exactly what he had tried to create around Mason for 12 years, not just because of external threats, but because of his own fear of connection. That bubble had been shattered, and despite the danger they had faced, Mason was thriving in its absence. "Dr. Carter's research has been invaluable," Cooper continued, referring to Elizabeth Carter's journals, which had been recovered from Lily's backpack and supplemented with additional notes found in the underground facility. "The compound's effects are now largely understood, and the FBI's medical team believes no additional developmental complications are expected." Victoria leaned forward. "And the enhanced abilities? Permanent, as far as we can determine. The secondary development phase Mason is experiencing now appears to be the final, significant neural reorganization. The enhancements stabilize after that. As the adults discussed medical findings and security protocols, Mason and Lily sat in Robert's expansive office, working on an advanced mathematics project assigned by their teachers. Through the glass walls, they could see the serious expressions of the adults, but couldn't hear the conversation. "They're talking about us again," Lily signed, not looking up from her tablet. Mason nodded. "Always are. At least they're including us in decisions now." Since the incident at the school, both Robert and Victoria had made a conscious effort to involve Mason and Lily in discussions about their future. It represented a fundamental shift in how they viewed the children, not as victims to be protected, but as capable individuals whose insights were valuable. "I found something interesting," Lily signed, sliding her tablet toward Mason. "In my mother's research notes, there's a passage about cognitive resonance between subjects exposed to the compound." Mason examined the complex notations and diagrams. Cognitive resonance? It's like mental synchronization. She theorized that subjects might develop the ability to communicate more efficiently with each other than with non-enhanced individuals. It might explain why our private sign language developed so quickly. Before Mason could respond, the door opened as the adults concluded their meeting. Robert approached the children, his signing now much more fluid after weeks of intensive practice. "Good news," he signed. "You're both cleared to participate in the spring academic competition. Security will be present, but discreet." Mason and Lily exchanged excited glances. The competition was prestigious, drawing gifted students from across the country. Under normal circumstances, first-year students wouldn't be eligible, but their academic performance had earned them special consideration. "One more thing," Robert continued, his expression softening. "The house in Connecticut is ready. We can move in next weekend if you both still want to." After extensive discussion, they had decided to relocate to a property closer to River Valley Academy. The Manhattan penthouse held too many complicated memories, and the new location would allow Mason and Lily to be day students rather than boarders, a compromise between independence and security. "Is Mom coming too?" Mason signed, glancing at Victoria. Robert nodded. "The guest house is prepared for her, as we discussed." The arrangement was unconventional, but practical. Victoria would maintain separate living quarters while remaining close enough for regular involvement in Mason's life. The relationship between Robert and Victoria remained complex, too much history and betrayal for simple reconciliation, but enough shared purpose to forge a cooperative co-parenting relationship. As the children returned to their project, Victoria approached Robert by the window overlooking the Manhattan skyline. "He seems happy," she observed quietly, "happier than I've ever seen him." Robert nodded, watching his son's animated signing as he explained something to Lily. "He has what he always needed: connection, understanding." "And you?" Victoria asked carefully. "Are you happy with these arrangements?" Robert considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, his life had been orderly, predictable, and emotionally barren. Now it was chaotic, complicated, and filled with challenges he never anticipated. Sharing parental responsibilities with a woman who had deceived him for years, raising a formerly homeless girl alongside his son, and navigating the extraordinary abilities both children possessed. "I'm present," he answered finally. "For perhaps the first time in Mason's life, I'm truly present. That's enough for now." As Victoria moved away to join the children, Robert's secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from his security team. The facial recognition system had flagged a possible sighting of Marcus Whitfield at an airport in Dubai. Robert glanced at Mason, now laughing at something Lily had signed, and made a decision. He would have the team investigate, but he wouldn't mention it to the children or disrupt their lives unless the threat became concrete. They deserved whatever normalcy they could find after everything they had endured. The shadow of Marcus Whitfield still loomed, but it no longer defined their existence. For now, that was victory enough. Spring blossomed across the Connecticut countryside as Mason and Lily prepared for the final round of the academic competition. The past 3 months had brought remarkable stability to their once turbulent lives. The new home functioned smoothly, with Robert commuting to Manhattan 3 days a week while working remotely the rest of the time, a significant shift in priorities for the formerly workaholic executive. Victoria had settled into the guest house, establishing a careful routine that allowed her to be present in Mason's life without overwhelming him. The relationship between mother and son grew steadily, built on shared interests and careful conversations about the past. Most surprisingly, Robert and Victoria had developed a cautious friendship. The betrayal and deception remained unresolved between them, but their shared commitment to Mason's well-being provided common ground. "You're staring again?" Lily signed to Mason as they sat in the school library, finalizing their presentation for the competition. Mason blinked, realizing he had indeed been watching his parents through the library window as they chatted with Headmistress Farrow on the lawn. "Still seems strange," he signed. "Them together." Lily smiled understandingly. "Adults are complicated." That afternoon, as they rehearsed their presentation in the school's auditorium, Mason noticed an unfamiliar man observing from the back row. Something about his posture triggered Mason's now well-honed threat assessment instincts. He nudged Lily, subtly directing her attention to the observer. "Security," she signed discreetly. Mason shook his head slightly. Their security detail was familiar by now, and this man matched no one on their protection team. Casually, he activated the panic button on his watch. Not the full emergency signal, but the low-level alert that would bring a security team to investigate without causing immediate lockdown. The man must have noticed the subtle movement. He stood abruptly and exited through the side door. By the time security personnel arrived and Mason explained his concerns, the stranger had vanished. "Probably nothing," Agent Cooper assured them after reviewing security footage. "But we'll enhance the images and run facial recognition to be certain." That evening, as Mason prepared for bed in their Connecticut home, he found a small package on his pillow, a box containing a chess piece, a white knight. There was no note, no explanation, but Mason knew instantly who had sent it. Marcus. The message was clear. The game continued. Marcus was still watching, still planning his next move. Mason sat on the edge of his bed, turning the chess piece over in his hands. His first instinct was to alert security immediately, but something held him back. This was a direct communication, a challenge issued not to Robert or Victoria or the FBI, but to him personally. After deliberation, he placed the chess piece on his desk and activated the security system's camera to record it. Then he wrote a careful note explaining when and where he had found it. He would tell his parents and Agent Cooper in the morning, but tonight he wanted to consider what this development meant. Marcus could have harmed him if that had been his intention. Instead, he had delivered a message demonstrating his ability to penetrate their security while making no actual threat. It was psychological warfare, an attempt to ensure they never felt truly safe. As Mason pondered this, his tablet chimed with an incoming message from Lily. "Check your chess set." Puzzled, he moved to his bookshelf, where a handcrafted chess set, a gift from Robert, was displayed. Looking at the board, Mason immediately noticed what Lily had somehow anticipated. The white knight was missing from the set. This wasn't a new chess piece. It was his own, removed and returned as Marcus's calling card. Mason's tablet chimed again with Lily's message. "He's been in the house." Cold fear washed over him as the implications became clear. Marcus hadn't just breached school security. He had entered their home, their personal spaces. The violation was profound. Mason quickly typed back, "Don't tell anyone yet. Meet me in the study in 5 minutes." When they converged in Robert's study, Mason explained his reasoning for temporary secrecy. If we tell them now, everything changes again. More security, more restrictions. Lily considered this, then signed thoughtfully. What's the alternative? We set our own trap, Mason signed back, his expression resolute. Marcus contacted me directly because he sees me as an equal, as a worthy opponent because of the cognitive enhancements. Let's use that against him. Their discussion continued late into the night. Two extraordinary minds crafting a strategy to confront the man who had altered their biology but underestimated their humanity. By morning, they had formulated a plan that was either brilliant or reckless, perhaps both. When they finally shared the discovery of the chess piece with their parents and security team, the adults reacted exactly as expected, with immediate concern and calls for enhanced security measures. What Mason and Lily didn't share was their own counter-strategy, already in motion. That afternoon, Mason placed a white pawn on his windowsill, visible from outside, positioned like a response in a chess game. Inside the hollow base, invisible to casual inspection, was a micro-tracker of their own design, created using components from their science projects. The message to Marcus was clear: I accept your challenge. What Marcus couldn't know was that the children had learned the most important lesson from their previous encounter. The best way to catch him wasn't through conventional security or authorities, but through his own obsession with proving his intellectual superiority. The academic competition was 2 days away. If their assessment of Marcus's psychology was correct, he wouldn't be able to resist attending the event where his two most successful subjects would be showcasing their enhanced abilities. They would be ready. As Mason prepared for bed that night, the white pawn was gone from his windowsill. The game had begun. 6 months later, the Connecticut house was alive with activity as final preparations were made for Lily's official adoption ceremony. The formal proceedings would take place at the courthouse in the morning, followed by a celebration with friends from River Valley Academy and the various security and FBI personnel who had become like extended family. Nervous? Mason signed to Lily as they sat on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the autumn sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Lily smiled, shaking her head. It just makes official what we already know, she signed back. We're family. The past 6 months had brought remarkable changes. The most significant had occurred at the academic competition, where their carefully laid trap had finally resulted in Marcus Whitfield's capture. True to their prediction, he'd been unable to resist attending the event where Mason and Lily were presenting their research. Research that deliberately incorporated elements of Elizabeth Carter's work on neural plasticity. The micro-tracker in the chess piece had led authorities directly to Marcus's hiding place, while the children's presentation had been designed specifically to draw him into the open with tantalizing references to breakthrough discoveries. When he approached them during the post-competition reception, disguised but unable to resist engaging with their research, FBI agents had been waiting. Marcus now awaited trial on multiple federal charges, from fraud and kidnapping to illegal human experimentation. His research had been confiscated and was being carefully studied by ethical oversight committees to determine what beneficial applications might be salvaged from his morally compromised work. More personally, the relationships between the unconventional family members had evolved in unexpected ways. Victoria had transitioned from the guest house to an apartment in town, maintaining close involvement with Mason while developing her own independent life. Robert had significantly restructured his company to allow more time at home, delegating responsibilities he once would have considered essential to his personal oversight. Most remarkably, the other children affected by Marcus's experiments had been located and brought into a special educational program at River Valley Academy. These children, each with unique cognitive enhancements and challenges, had formed an immediate bond with Mason and Lily, a connection Elizabeth Carter's research had predicted through her cognitive resonance theory. "Dad's watching us again," Mason signed, nodding toward the kitchen window, where Robert could be seen pretending to check on dinner preparations while actually keeping an eye on the children. Lily laughed. "Some habits don't change. He still worries." "With good reason," Mason acknowledged. The shadow of their experiences would never completely disappear, nor would the unique challenges their enhanced cognition presented. Regular medical evaluations continued to monitor their development, though no concerning changes had emerged. As twilight deepened around them, Lily's expression became more serious. "Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like without the compound, without what Marcus did?" Mason considered the question thoughtfully. "I'd be hearing. You might still have your mother. We probably would never have met." He paused, his hands momentarily still. "But we wouldn't be us." Lily nodded, understanding the complex truth in his statement. Their abilities, their challenges, their shared experiences, all had shaped them in fundamental ways. To wish away the compound's effects would be to wish away essential parts of themselves. "They're calling us," Lily signed, noticing Victoria waving from the doorway. "Dinner's ready." As they headed inside to join the pre-adoption celebration dinner, Mason reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the isolated boy whose desperate signing had gone unnoticed, to the young man now surrounded by people who understood and valued him. From the homeless girl living in a cardboard box to the soon-to-be officially adopted daughter of one of New York's wealthiest businessmen. Their paths had crossed because of Marcus Whitfield's unethical experiments, but what had flourished afterward was entirely their own creation. A family forged not through traditional bonds, but through choice, courage, and the willingness to see beyond limitations to the extraordinary possibilities that lay within each of them. At the dinner table, surrounded by the unlikely family they had created, Robert raised his glass in a toast. Over the past year, he had become fluent in sign language, able to communicate with Mason without interpretation. Now, his hands moved confidently as he signed, "To second chances, to new beginnings, and to the family we choose." As glasses clinked around the table, Mason caught Lily's eye and added a private sign just for her, "To being seen." She smiled and signed back, "To being heard." In that moment, in their own unique way, they were both